have a quick lesson today that I thought was worth sharing. It comes from a recent club game that I played, and it's kind of around broadly understanding like what the goal is in a particular chess position. I know that's a little bit vague, but I kind of mean like, is it time to attack and be aggressive, or is it time to try to, I don't know, positionally, like try to improve a few pieces? Or is it time to try to kind of hunker down and defend the position for now until maybe another opportunity arises later in the game? And as I'll show you in the game in just a minute, I picked the wrong option, even though it should have been quite obvious, actually. And I just thought it was interesting how, I kind of picked the wrong move, but really I picked the wrong plan. And sometimes it turns out that can cost you the game. So let's have a look. I hope it's helpful for you. So I was playing with the black pieces, and the opening isn't super important. We ended up getting into an exchange Caro-Kann. We brought out knights, we brought out bishops, and we traded here. Okay, one thing I remember is I had some trouble with this pin on the knight. I feel like sometimes in the Caro-Kann, this pin happens and there's pressure here with the queen, and I kind of struggle to deal with it. But in any case, we got castled. There was a trade here. I left the queen here because often in these lines, it's nice to continue putting pressure on this b-pawn. In this case, according to the engine, apparently it would have been better to take with the queen and then maybe, play along the c-file against this pawn or something. But in any case, this is what we did. I attacked the knight, pushed b3, and then this was probably also a bit of an inaccuracy, to be honest. I wanted to kind of ask that bishop the question of what is it doing? Are we going to stick with the pin by moving back to something like h4? Or is the bishop just going to go somewhere else? Or are we going to just trade off that knight, right? And so my opponent moved the bishop back, and then I took the opportunity to get my knight out of there. So I finally got out of that pin. It was something I was kind of trying to do, but there may have been sort of better plans early on in the game. In any case, now the next thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to do this pawn break. And again, I don't know if this was really quite the right plan, but it sort of causes a few trades, and I felt like I got things opened up. And now my opponent immediately starts attacking my king. And this is kind of the theme of the rest of the game. Here, of course, this pawn is pinned, and so I need to be concerned about the bishop potentially taking the h-pawn there. So I actually moved my king up to h7. I don't know if this was really the right move, but it held off the attack for now. And then my opponent starts bringing the other rook and just is trying to bring, all of the pieces around onto the king side to really attack the king. And I felt like maybe I could counterattack a little bit along here. And once he brought the rook down to e5, I felt like, okay, now, like I'm getting nervous about this attack, but now I think I can actually prevent it from getting any worse because I can put my bishop down here, and then I can trade off the bishops. And that's going to get rid of any, sacrificing of the bishop on h6, any of those sorts of ideas. So at this point, I was feeling pretty good. I felt like, maybe I had fended off the attack and maybe I would be okay. And so this is the position, actually. This is the critical position right here where I made the wrong decision. And it's because I felt like, well, with the bishops off the board, I should be okay. Like, sure, he can bring his rook around here and, he's got pressure here and pressure here. But I felt like, can't I just put my rook on g8 and defend this pawn and everything is okay? And the answer, as you'll see, is no. And I guess I just calculated it quite quickly. We were playing with a clock. I wasn't particularly low on time, so I could have taken a bit more time here. But I just felt like, rook g8 was going to solve all of my problems. So let's play rook c8. And this is where, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I didn't just pick the wrong move. I picked the wrong plan. The thing is, his attack was still very strong, and I should have realized that and, considered that as I was looking at candidate moves and as I was deciding what move to play next. Instead of picking the incorrect plan of, okay, the attack has fizzled out. I don't need to worry about it. Let's work on, setting up my own attack. That was not the correct plan. And ultimately, I was punished for choosing that plan. So no big surprise, he brought his rook around. And after I defended, a whole sequence plays out, which goes very poorly for me. But let's back up here for a second. What might I have done if I had realized that the attack was still strong and I needed to defend? One of the simplest things to do, actually, would be back here to play something like queen b7 instead. And queen b7 kind of provides some defense over here. So after rook g3, I can push f6, and now this pawn is defended. And the key is, as you'll see in a minute, he was able to sack the pawn here and then sack the rook here rather, and then take here with the queen. But in this case, after sacking the rook here, being able to recapture with the queen means that I'm also defending this square. And so that would have been a pretty simple defense, just bringing the queen to a position where it can defend that g7 square. Because if the rook is defending the square, then even after sacking the rook and I take it, now, h6 is still not defended, and that ended up ultimately being the problem. So queen b7 would have been a good move. Another option is actually just to push the f-pawn right away, and then even if the rook comes over, the engine doesn't even want me to put the queen somewhere where it can defend this pawn, because actually the king can escape if he sacrifices the rook here. So something like this, I take, and then as the queen comes down, now the king has this f7 square to move to, and if the queen keeps attacking, I can move down here, and basically my king, it looks a little bit awkward, but my king actually is safe in this position. And so unfortunately, I didn't do any of that because I felt like the attack wasn't that strong, and I was wrong. So I played rook a c8 instead, again, trying to attack that pawn, which was the incorrect plan. After rook g3, technically it's still salvageable, but it's a little bit hard to see. Basically, I just still need to move the f-pawn somewhere. Like moving to f6 means that once again, capturing this pawn doesn't work because my king can escape. So that would have worked. I didn't play that. I played rook g8 because, again, earlier, this is what I calculated. I felt like, you can't sack the rook here now because I'm just going to take it. But unfortunately, after taking with check and then I recapture, and then, as I mentioned, queen takes on h6. Now, this is where I resigned because there's nothing to be done. The king has to move here, and then this is checkmate. And so I just felt like this was worth sharing because it wasn't like I necessarily just picked the wrong move. As I mentioned, it's that I picked the entirely wrong plan. I misjudged what the correct plan was in this position. I misjudged the fact that I still needed to keep on defending. And if I had have just focused on defending, then I might have been able to actually, fend off this attack and perhaps even been better in the end game. And I feel like this can be fairly common, right? Like we can misjudge a position and again, not just pick the wrong move, but pick the wrong plan, kind of go after the wrong thing. And so being able to correctly evaluate a position and figure out what the correct strategy and plan is in a position can be really helpful for improving our game. So I hope you found this lesson as helpful as I did. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you on the next one.